He said she didn't belong at that company, that she wasn't the right fit, that her voice was too soft, her clothes too plain, and her life too complicated. But what he didn't know is that Camila Reyes had spent her whole life opening doors nobody else wanted to touch. The first was when she crossed the border at 17, alone, afraid, with a torn backpack and a dream held together by prayer. The second was when she decided to keep her baby even after the father vanished without a word. And the third was when she took a job as a real estate agent at Dalton Realty Group, knowing she'd have to hide parts of herself just to survive the day. But Camila wasn't looking for charity. She was looking for a chance. Every morning, before the sun even rose, she cooked breakfast, packed therapy snacks, helped her daughter Sophia, 7 years old and non-verbal, into her special ed van, and then raced across town to show houses she could never afford herself. "Sell it like it's yours," the boss would say. And she did, because when Sophia needed a new therapist, or when the insurance threatened to drop them again, Camila couldn't afford to miss a single commission. No one saw her. But she sold more than anyone else, until one afternoon, the boss called her in. His name was Mr. Dalton, and he sat behind that giant oak desk like he was God handing out permission slips. He stared at her blazer, the one she got second-hand, and said with a crooked smile, "Camila, this isn't a charity. I need people who are all in, not single mums with personal issues." She swallowed her pride. She wanted to respond, but she thought of the therapy bill in her purse and stayed silent. She went back to her desk and kept working, because that's what you do when the world doesn't leave you room to breathe. But that same afternoon, the school called. Sophia had a meltdown. She needed her mother. Camila asked for permission. Mr. Dalton rolled his eyes, said nothing. She left anyway. When she got there, Sophia was sitting in the corner, hands over her ears, rocking back and forth. Camila sat beside her and whispered the words she always did. "I'm here now. You're safe." That night, she tucked Sophia in and prayed they wouldn't call again tomorrow. But the next morning, when she walked into the office, her nameplate was gone. In its place was an envelope. Inside, a termination letter. Excessive absences, lack of dedication. She didn't cry, she didn't scream. She just gathered her things and took the last drawing Sophia had left on her desk. A red house with a big blue door, as if her daughter knew. Sometimes, Mama has to open a different door. If you've ever worked twice as hard to be seen as half as good, if you've ever been told you're too much, just for loving your child the way they need to be loved, take a moment for yourself. Because this story, baby, might be closer to yours than you think. The days that followed felt like standing in a storm with no umbrella, no shoes, and no one watching. Camila applied to every job she could find. Real estate firms, call centers, food delivery, anything. Most never replied. The few that did wanted open availability, weekends, nights, no exceptions, as if motherhood were a weakness, not a full-time job on its own. Every morning she packed Sophia's lunch, kissed her forehead, and sent her off to school like nothing was wrong, then sat in silence, wondering how long until the rent came due or the therapy center called about an unpaid session. She felt invisible and worse, ashamed. Ashamed for choosing her child over a job, ashamed for needing help, ashamed for daring to believe she belonged in an office full of people who never had to choose between a paycheck and their child's meltdown. Then one night, as she folded laundry by the kitchen table, Sophia wandered over. She was holding a paper in her hand. "Mama," Camila looked down. It was a drawing, a woman with a red cape, standing in front of a house without a roof, but with a golden door. She pointed to the figure and asked again, "Is that you?" Camila nodded, and for the first time in days, she smiled. That night, something shifted. She decided she would no longer beg for a seat at someone else's table. She would build her own. With her last savings, she printed business cards, reactivated her license, called old clients and friends. She built a tiny website, posted on neighborhood forums. Independent real estate consultant, bilingual, reliable, I know what it's like to need a door. At first, nothing, but then a call, then two, then three. Clients who remembered her kindness, families who trusted her. She wasn't making much, but it was enough. Enough for another week of therapy. Enough to keep the lights on. Enough to look Sophia in the eyes and say, "We're going to be okay." And then one morning, 6 months after she walked out of Dalton Realty, her phone buzzed. A new email, subject line, urgent property sale. She opened it, froze. It was from DaltonDrugGroup.com, the man who fired her, the man who told her she didn't belong. "Camila, I need to sell my personal property ASAP. The market's turned. Someone said you're the best. Can we talk?" She read it again. And again, no apology, no shame, just desperation. She looked at the wall, at the newest drawing Sophia had taped up. A house with 2 doors, and Camila, standing in the middle, smiling. Camila sat at her tiny kitchen table, laptop open, finger hovering over the keyboard. The cursor blinked on that email from DaltonDrugGroup.com, like it was daring her to respond. 6 months ago, this man had stripped her dignity with a single sentence. Now he was asking for help, begging, really. Not once had he asked how she was. Not once had he acknowledged what he'd done. Just a request, cold, businesslike. "I need you." She could have ignored him, could have deleted the email and gone on with her day. She owed him nothing. But Camila wasn't made of spite. She was made of struggle and grace, and deep down she knew what Sophia would want her to do. So she typed just 4 words. "Let's set a meeting." The next day, she walked into a cafe in downtown Houston, not as an employee, not as a desperate mother, but as a businesswoman. Dalton was already seated, looking worn down, his hair thinner, his suit wrinkled. He stood when he saw her, offered a handshake, but Camila simply nodded and sat down. "Camila," he said, clearing his throat, "you look well." She didn't smile, didn't make it easy for him. "What's the property?" He pulled out a folder. A large house, once worth millions, now foreclosed, neglected, a burden he couldn't carry. He tried to explain. Said the market turned. Said he'd lost staff, trust, cash flow. Said he needed someone discreet, someone smart, someone like her. Camila listened in silence, took notes, didn't flinch, until he said, "You were always my best agent. I should have never—" She raised her hand, cut him off. "Let's keep this professional, Mr. Dalton. You need results. I deliver them. That's all." He blinked, nodded. For the first time in years, he was looking at her, not as a problem, not as a liability, but as power. She set her terms. No percentage, flat rate, cash up front, no name shared, no calls after hours, and if he wanted results, he'd wait like everyone else. Dalton agreed. He had no choice. Camila walked out of that cafe taller than she'd ever stood in that office. Not because she humiliated him, but because she didn't need to. She didn't become small to make him comfortable. And that, my love, that's what dignity looks like. Yeah, but that night, while Camila sat on the floor with Sophia, sorting mail and eating cereal for dinner, a new envelope slipped under the door. Plain, no return address. Inside, a photo of her, sitting in that cafe, face clear, time stamped, and a note. "Be careful who you trust." Her heart stopped. Someone was watching. The photo shook her, not because she was afraid, but because she recognized the kind of silence it came with. It wasn't Dalton's style. He didn't do subtle. Whoever had slipped that envelope under her door was playing a different game. The next morning, she dropped Sophia at school, then drove to the local precinct. Not to file a report, just to ask questions. The officer on duty barely looked up. "Ma'am, unless there's a direct threat, we can't really—" She nodded. Expected as much. Women like Camila. We learn early on that fear doesn't buy attention. Only blood does. So she drove home, locked the doors, and kept moving. She dove into work. Listings, showings, calls. Dalton's property was a mess. Leaks, termites, legal issues. But Camila knew how to flip broken things. She listed it under her own brand, no mention of Dalton, and within 2 weeks she had 3 offers on the table. Enough to save his skin. He called her 3 times that day. Left a voicemail on the 4th. "Camila, thank you, really. You saved me." She didn't call back, but the next morning, while sorting documents in her car, she saw something strange. A man. Across the street. Too still. Watching. She turned her phone camera on, snapped a photo. Gone. Later that night, she went through the school pickup routine, smile on her face, voice calm, but her eyes scanned every car in the lot. And then, she saw it. A silver SUV, tinted windows, no plates, the same one she'd seen parked outside her complex. Now here, at Sophia's school. She didn't wait. She walked straight to the principal's office. "I want you to know," she said, voice steady, "that if anything happens to my daughter, I will find out who allowed it." The principal nodded, jotted notes. But Camila could see the fear in her eyes, because fear recognizes fear. That night, Sophia crawled into bed beside her, held her mother's hand and whispered, "You protect me, Mama." Camila held back the tears, kissed her daughter's head, because she'd survived worse than fear. But something in her gut told her this wasn't just about revenge. Someone wanted to break her before she rose too far, and that someone was closer than she thought. There are people in this world who only respect you when you're beneath them. Mr. Dalton was one of those people. To him, Camila was valuable when she was desperate, manageable when she was quiet, invisible when she was useful. But now, she wasn't just surviving, she was succeeding, and that was dangerous. She closed his sale in record time, filed the papers herself, delivered the check in a sealed envelope. No thank you lunch, no handshake, just business. She thought that would be the end of it, but days later, an email arrived from a name she didn't recognize. "Thought you might want to see what your old boss has been saying about you." Attached were screenshots, private messages, a group chat with other local agents, mostly men. One read, "She's cute when she plays professional. Shame about the kid." Another, "Camila, the one with the special daughter. She's not stable, wouldn't recommend." She stared at the screen, heart pounding, not with fear, with fury. He wasn't just trying to hurt her reputation. He was trying to erase her dignity, undermine her, discredit her. The words burned, not just the lies, but the cruelty behind them. They weren't mocking her skills. They were mocking her motherhood. As if being a mother to a child with needs, was some kind of defect. She closed the laptop, stood up, and for the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to scream, just once, a sound from the bottom of her soul. Then, silence. Sophia came running, scared. Camila dropped to her knees, pulled her close. "I'm okay," she whispered. "I promise." But inside, something had changed. She wasn't going to be quiet anymore. That night, she gathered every message, every email, every voicemail. She didn't just keep receipts. She made copies, sent them to herself, to a lawyer friend, to a digital archive. She didn't know what Dalton was planning, but she knew one thing. Whatever war he wanted to start, she was ready. But the next day, while cleaning out her glove box, she found something strange. A USB drive, tiny, black, no label. She didn't remember putting it there, didn't remember seeing it before. She hesitated, slipped it into her laptop. And what she found wasn't just about her, it was about him. The screen lit up, folder after folder, all labeled with dates, locations, initials. She clicked one, a video file, security footage from the Dalton Realty office, from the conference room. There was Dalton, smiling, laughing, leaning over the shoulder of a young woman. She looked uncomfortable, shifted in her chair. He kept touching her shoulder. Then another file, a voice memo. He said if I didn't go to dinner with him, I'd lose my listing rights. I didn't know what to do. Please don't tell anyone I told you this. Camila covered her mouth. These weren't just complaints. They were evidence, patterns, abuse, predation, dozens of files, all hidden, all buried. Why were they on a USB? Who put it in her car? Someone wanted her to have this. someone who knew what Dalton had done, what he was still doing. She paced the room, heart racing. This was bigger than her. This wasn't just about real estate. It was about every woman who'd been told to shut up and smile. But going public, that meant putting Sophia at risk. Her name, her face. She couldn't just light a fire and walk away, so she called someone she trusted. Her friend Marcia, a janitor who used to clean the Dalton office at night. A woman most people ignored, but Camila remembered. She met Marcia at a diner near the freeway, told her everything, showed her the USB. Marcia went quiet, then said, "You're not the only one he's hurt. I know things too, things they think I didn't hear while I scrubbed their trash." Camila reached across the table, held her hand. "We can do this, but we have to be smart." They made a plan, not for revenge, for justice, real justice. But that night when Camila returned home, her front door was cracked open, just enough, not forced, not broken, just unlocked. And inside, Sophia's drawings were torn, scattered on the floor, all except one. Taped to the fridge, a black house, no door, just smoke. She stood in the doorway, still, breath shallow, heart beating loud enough to drown out the silence. The apartment looked violated, not wrecked, not looted, no valuables taken, but everything personal, touched. Sophia's drawings, ripped and scattered like trash. The calendar with her therapy appointments, torn in half. The framed photo of Camila holding her as a newborn, shattered. Someone had been here, not to steal, but to scare. She checked the windows. Nothing forced, no alarms. She searched the rooms, calling Sophia's name, even though she knew her daughter was still safe at aftercare. But fear does that to a mother, makes her check things twice, even when she knows the truth. She grabbed the drawing still taped to the fridge, the one with the black house, no door, just smoke. Sophia didn't draw like that, not unless she felt something. Camila knew then, this wasn't just a warning, it was a message. Whoever had come inside her home knew where she lived, knew what she loved, and they weren't finished. That night, she didn't sleep. She packed a bag, grabbed Sophia's weighted blanket, her favorite noise-cancelling headphones, her meds, and by morning they were staying with Marcia, a small back room in a tiny duplex, but it was warm, quiet, safe. Camila apologized for intruding. Marcia just waved her hand and said, "Girl, please. You think I'm gonna let that man win? You stay here as long as you need." And just like that, Camila had a village, small but fierce. That same morning, Marcia pulled a small folder out of her purse. It was old, torn edges, creased paper. Inside, more receipts, old time cards, notes from co-workers, emails sent late at night, a journal from a young woman who used to work reception. "He offered me money if I came to the hotel. I said no. The next week I was written up for attitude. I've been scared to tell anyone." Camila read the page. Tears welled up, not just for herself, but for every woman this man had tried to silence with a smile and a threat. They had enough now, more than enough. But what they didn't have was protection. They needed someone who could move the story forward, loudly, legally, safely. So Marcia made the call. To a cousin in Austin, a woman named Tanisha, civil rights lawyer, advocate, mother. She agreed to meet. Camila would have to drive to the city the next morning, with Sophia, with everything they had, and face the storm head-on. But that night, as she helped Sophia fall asleep on a borrowed mattress, her phone buzzed, unknown number, blocked ID, a voice message. She played it, one sentence. "You're not special, Camila. You're disposable, just like the rest." She deleted the message, but in her bones, she knew whose voice it was, and she knew he was running out of ways to control her, and that made him dangerous. They left before sunrise, the sky still dark, Houston lights fading in the rear view. Sophia sat in the back seat, headphones on, drawing in her sketchbook. Camila kept glancing at her through the mirror. Every few minutes, she whispered, "We're okay, we're safe," half for her daughter, half for herself. She hadn't seen Dalton since the cafe, hadn't spoken to him since the sale, but he was speaking now, in threats, in shadows, in silence, and still, she kept driving. When they arrived at the office in Austin, Tanisha was waiting, tall, calm, with the kind of presence that doesn't ask for respect. It just has it. She hugged Camila like she already knew her story, then led her inside. Over the next 3 hours, Camila laid it all out. The termination, the harassment, the surveillance, the break-in, the USB. Tanisha didn't flinch, didn't interrupt, just listened. When it was done, she said, "He made a mistake. He underestimated a mother." They went over options, not just a complaint, but a civil suit, a formal investigation. Tanisha had contacts at the state licensing board, at the press. She said there were already whispers about Dalton. Camila's case could be the match, but she had to be ready, because once it started, there was no going back. Camila took a deep breath, looked at Sophia, curled in the office chair, sketching a house with a big yellow door. "I'm ready," she said, and she meant it. They filed the paperwork that same day, attached statements, audio files, emails, photos. Within 48 hours, the board launched a formal review. Within a week, 2 more women came forward. By the second week, Dalton's office closed for restructuring. But Camila wasn't celebrating yet, because the day after the story broke online, a car followed her home from the grocery store, sat at the end of the street for 40 minutes, then drove off. She reported it, filed everything, kept records. Because if they were trying to intimidate her now, it meant they were losing. Then, one afternoon, a letter came. Not typed, handwritten, no signature. "They're going to try to blame you. Don't back down. You're not alone." Inside the envelope, a single item, a key, no note, no explanation, just a silver key, worn, old, with a blue ribbon tied around it. Camila held it in her hand, and for the first time in weeks, she felt peace. She didn't know what door it opened, but she knew she had something they didn't. She had truth, and they couldn't erase that. Camila stared at the key for a long time. It wasn't from her house, not from any property she'd sold. It had no tag, no number, no lock to match it, but it had meaning. The kind that doesn't rattle, it rests, like it knows what it's meant to open. She kept it in her coat pocket, touched it during court calls, held it while writing statements, kept it close on the days she felt like quitting. Because by now, the pressure was mounting. Dalton's lawyers had filed motions, trying to paint her as unstable, trying to twist her daughter's diagnosis into an emotional liability, trying and failing. Because Camila had something their fancy firms and glass offices couldn't replicate. She had the truth, she had receipts, she had us. By now, more women had come forward. Agents, assistants, interns, janitors, all with the same story. He laughed when I cried. He told me to be grateful. He said women like me should know our place. And every time a new voice joined the fight, Camila felt less alone. But still, there were days it hurt. When Sophia came home overstimulated and confused, asking why Mommy couldn't pick her up from therapy anymore, why people kept calling the house, why the news truck was parked outside, Camila sat her down one night, knee to knee, took her hands gently. "Do you remember the story about the wolf that tried to huff and puff and blow the house down?" Sophia nodded. "Well, we're building a house they can't blow down, one brick at a time, one truth at a time." Her daughter smiled, then pulled a crayon from behind her ear and drew a house. Red roof, blue door, a gold key next to it. Camila didn't cry. She just kissed her forehead and whispered, "That's my girl." But the next morning, she received a notice, a legal summons. Dalton had filed a defamation counterclaim, claiming she'd destroyed his business, demanding restitution. Millions. Camila sat in her car, hands shaking, not because she believed he could win, but because she knew he wasn't done trying to break her. And this time, he was coming for everything. The court date was set, 3 weeks. 3 weeks to prepare for a trial she never asked for, to defend herself for telling the truth, to stand in front of strangers and bear every wound. Tanisha moved fast, filed motions, subpoenaed records, pulled transcripts, texts, testimonies. The case was strong, but the fear, still real. Camila stayed with Marcia. Sophia adjusted, slowly. She still had her therapist, her routines, her drawings. But her drawings had changed. She wasn't sketching houses anymore. She was drawing people, women standing shoulder to shoulder, some with tears, some with capes, one in the middle, holding a key. Camila taped the picture to her folder of court documents, a reminder. She wasn't just fighting for herself, she was fighting for them. And then, just a few days before trial, a woman showed up at the office. No appointment, no call, just walked in, early 30s, nervous hands, designer bag. She introduced herself quietly. "My name's Clarissa. I used to work for Dalton. For years." Camila offered her a seat. Clarissa hesitated, then pulled out a file. "I have something. I think it's what you've been looking for." Inside the folder, a contract, signed, stamped, confidential. It detailed a severance agreement. Dalton paying Clarissa tens of thousands in exchange for silence. He tried to buy my silence, and I took it. I was scared, but I can't sleep anymore. There was also a journal, notes from inside meetings, witness accounts, recordings Clarissa had secretly saved, just in case. She'd been in the room when Dalton joked about Camila. When he bragged that she's just a single mom, no one's going to believe her. Camila sat still, didn't speak. Clarissa took a breath and said, "I want to testify. I want to make it right." And in that moment, Camila saw it. The tide was turning, not because power changed hands, but because women were standing together. Later that night, Camila walked to the little park by Marcia's house. Sophia was asleep. She pulled the silver key from her coat pocket, looked at it under the street lamp. And something clicked. She walked 2 blocks over, to an old office she used to clean at night years ago. There was a side entrance, rusty, quiet, forgotten. She reached into her pocket, slid the key into the lock. It turned, smooth, gentle, like it had been waiting. She opened the door, and inside, nothing. Dust, air, silence. But Camila smiled, because it wasn't about what was inside. It was about the fact that the door had opened, and no man in a suit could take that from her now. The courtroom was colder than it needed to be. Fluorescent lights, plastic seats, the smell of metal and fear. Camila sat at the front table beside Tanisha. She wore the same navy blue blazer Dalton once mocked her for, but this time she wore it like armor. On the other side, Dalton and his 2 attorneys, clean suits, fake charm. You could smell the arrogance from across the room. He didn't look at her, not once, not when the judge entered, not when the jury took their seats, not even when her name was read aloud. But Camila looked at him, not with hate, not with fear, with clarity. She wasn't the same woman he fired. She was the woman he tried to erase, and failed. Opening arguments began. Dalton's lawyers painted her as vindictive, unstable, financially motivated. They mentioned her daughter, called her a distraction, said Camila used her personal circumstances to gain sympathy. Tanisha stood without flinching. "What you're about to see," she said, "is not a woman seeking pity. It's a woman seeking justice. Not just for herself, but for every woman who's been told to sit down and stay silent." One by one, the witnesses came forward. Marcia, Clarissa, 2 former interns, a receptionist, a janitor, women who had nothing to gain and everything to lose. Each of them told a different version of the same story. "He made me feel small. He said I owed him. He laughed when I cried. He told me no one would believe me." Camila listened, hands clasped, eyes forward. When it was her turn, she rose slowly. The room went still. She walked to the stand and placed one item before her, Sophia's drawing, the house, the door, the gold key. She looked the jury in the eye and said, "I'm not here to destroy a man. I'm here because I almost let him destroy me, and I won't let him do it to someone else." She told them everything, the humiliations, the firing, the surveillance, the threats. And through it all, she never raised her voice. She didn't need to. Truth has its own volume. When she stepped down, even the court reporter was wiping her eyes. But just before the day ended, Dalton finally took the stand. He smirked, played calm, tried to paint himself as misunderstood, until Tanisha brought out the recordings, the messages, the silent footage, the USB files, and then the severance contracts. His hands began to shake, his voice cracked. And for the first time in all these years, he looked scared. The judge recessed for the day. Verdict would come tomorrow. Camila stepped outside into the Texas dusk, the air warm, the sky wide, and for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, she breathed without weight. But when she unlocked the car, she saw it, a note on her windshield. "Win or lose, you still lose. Keep pushing and we'll push back." She looked up. The parking lot was empty. But that note, it wasn't from Dalton. Someone else was watching. Camila sat in the motel room that night, Sophia asleep beside her. The trial was over, but peace hadn't come yet. That note on the windshield, it wasn't Dalton's style. Too blunt, too desperate. Someone else, someone behind the curtain, was afraid of what would come next, because this wasn't just about one man. It was about a system, a brotherhood, an industry that fed off silence. And Camila had just cracked it open. She didn't tell Tanisha about the note right away, didn't want it to cloud the verdict. Instead, she sat in the dark, watching Sophia breathe. There's a kind of strength that mothers carry, the kind that doesn't ask for applause, the kind that holds broken things together with love and tape and late-night prayers. Camila was that kind, and when morning came, she was ready. The courtroom filled slowly. Reporters, supporters, strangers who'd followed her story. The jury filed in, faces unreadable. The judge asked for silence. And then, on all counts, we find in favor of the plaintiff, Camila Reyes. Whispers, gasps. Camila didn't cry. She just closed her eyes and exhaled. It wasn't just a legal victory, it was a moral one. Her name was cleared, Dalton's practices exposed, and a wave of new investigations were already opening. But the most powerful moment came after court, when a woman approached her on the steps, tears in her eyes, cracked hands, a baby strapped to her chest. She whispered, "You gave me the courage to leave him." Then another and another, women who had been watching, listening, waiting for a door to open. And now it had. Camila clutched Sophia's hand, smiled. But in the crowd she saw him, not Dalton, another man. Sharp suit, phone in hand, staring too long. He nodded once, then vanished. The threat wasn't gone, but neither was her courage. That night, back at Marsh's, she found Sophia's latest drawing. It was a set of keys, big ones, small ones, all labeled with names. One said, "Mommy's key opens everything," and Camila knew some doors might never lock again. But that wasn't something to fear. That was freedom. You would think that after a woman wins, after she stands in a courtroom and gets her name back, after she stares down the man who tried to break her, that peace would come easy. But Camila learned the hard truth. Sometimes the quiet after the storm is louder than the storm itself. The news moved on. Reporters packed up. The internet found another story to chase. But Camila, she still had to live, still had bills, still had therapy appointments, still had nights where Sophia woke up crying from sounds no one else could hear. The threats had stopped, but that didn't mean safety had arrived. Tanisha called every few days just to check in. Marcia made tea in the mornings. Clarissa started a support group for survivors, named it The Key. But Camila, she stayed quiet. She needed time to remember who she was before all this. One afternoon, she walked into the Dalton office building, now empty, for lease, dust on the doors, chairs overturned, coffee mugs still on desks. It was like they left in a hurry. She walked through slowly, room by room, until she reached what used to be her cubicle, still there, same spot. She sat down, closed her eyes, and for just a moment she let herself grieve, not for the man who fired her, but for the woman who used to sit there. who thought she had to be small to survive, who thought strength meant silence. When she stood up, she didn't look back. She had a different office now, in a small storefront near the bus line. Her name on the glass, Reyes Realty, honest work, open doors. Her first listing wasn't big, a 2-bedroom fixer-upper, but when she showed it, she didn't talk about square footage. She told the couple, "This house needs love, but if you walk through that door with hope, it'll rise to meet you." They signed on the spot. Later that week, she opened her email. A new message, subject line, "I'd like to work for you." It was from a young woman, single mother, recently laid off. Camila replied, "Let's talk." Because now she wasn't just opening doors for herself, she was holding them open for others. But that same night, while putting Sophia to bed, she heard a knock at the door. Soft, measured. She opened it, and standing there was Mr. Dalton, in jeans, no suit, no smirk, just a man. And in his hand, a resume. She didn't speak right away, just looked at him. And for once, he didn't look like a man in control. He looked tired, thinner, different. But Camila wasn't interested in who he seemed to be. She cared about what he'd done. He held out the paper. "I heard you started your own agency. I'm not welcome many places these days. I figured maybe—" His voice trailed off. Camila looked at the resume. It was clean, neat, but blank in all the ways that mattered. No mention of the harm, no accountability, just words. She didn't invite him in, didn't need to. She stepped outside, closed the door gently behind her. "You want a job?" He nodded. "I need one." She tilted her head. "You fired me for taking my daughter to therapy, called me unreliable, weak. Remember that?" His eyes dropped. "I wasn't in a good place." "No," she said, "I wasn't, and I still showed up." He started to say something else, but she stopped him. "I don't run my business like you did. We work with dignity here, with kindness. That means we also believe in redemption." He looked up, hope flickering. "But redemption isn't just asking for a job. It's taking responsibility." She folded the paper, handed it back. "I suggest you start there." Then she opened the door, but before she walked in, she turned back. "By the way, I forgive you, but I don't owe you anything." And she closed the door, soft, final, like a chapter turning. Inside, Sophia stood in the hallway, watching. Camila knelt down. "You heard that?" Her daughter nodded, then reached into her pocket and pulled out a new drawing. A house, with a line of people outside, each holding a key, and above it, a sign. "Doors opened by Camila." Camila smiled, held her daughter close, because now, no matter who knocked, she knew the difference between a locked door and a sacred boundary, and she'd never let anyone take that away again. Camila once believed power lived in titles, in offices with glass walls, in signatures on paychecks, in men who wore suits and called it leadership. But now she knew better. Power lived in presence. In every door she refused to walk through quietly. In every moment she said enough with nothing but a look. Her name was no longer whispered. It was respected. Reyes Realty grew, not into a skyscraper, but into something better, a haven. She hired women no one else would, single mothers, women with records, older women who'd been told they were past their prime. She trained them, trusted them, watched them bloom. Every desk had a small sign, "You are not too much, you are enough." Sophia's drawings hung in the lobby, not because they were decorative, but because they were truth. Every home they sold, every door they opened, was rooted in the belief that everyone deserves a place they don't have to shrink to fit. One morning, Camila stood in the back of a showing, watched as a young mother walked through with 2 little boys. The agent helping her, a woman who once sat in Camila's office, shaking with fear that no one would ever hire her again. Now she stood tall, confident, glowing. That's what happens, you see, when someone gives you the space to stand in your full size. Camila still had quiet days, hard days, days where Sophia's meltdowns came without warning, days where bills stacked up, or fear crept in, or old trauma knocked at the door. But she knew what to do now. She didn't hide. She named it, faced it, prayed, breathed, rested, because survival wasn't the goal anymore. Wholeness was. One afternoon she pulled out the silver key, still worn, still heavy. She thought of throwing it away once. But now she kept it in a glass frame, a reminder. She used to think that key came from someone else. But now she knew she was the key all along, not just for herself, but for every woman who thought she had to be silent to be strong. She didn't tear the old system down with fire. She starved it with truth. And now she stood in front of the door to her own life, turned the handle, and walked through. Not because someone let her in, but because she built the door herself. She thought she worked for a man who held all the keys, but in the end, he was just a man behind a locked office. And she was the one who had the courage to find the right door and open it. If this story reminded you of your own, leave it in the comments, baby, because sometimes the door ain't locked. We just need the right key and the courage to turn it. This was Mr. Solomon, and I'll see you at the next open door.